Hi, everyone. Thank you all so much for coming to Supernova's very first in-person event and happy hour. So thank you for joining us for our inaugural event. Today we have Laura here for a fireside chat. And then we also have like a scavenger hunt that you all can play later, along with a game prize, which is called Hues and Cues, but we'll talk more about that later. First, let me take out all my placards and introduce Laura. So today we're joined by Laura, who is the design systems manager and lead at Muse. She's typically based in Berlin and Brussels, but today we're lucky enough to have you here in Prague with us for our fireside chat. So Laura currently leads the design system team at Muse, where she's known for her strong commitment to the principle of form follows function. Before joining Muse, Laura was the mobile design system lead at HelloFresh, where she spearheaded a team of 10 skilled engineers in the development and enhancement of a multi-brand, multi-platform design system that empowered 10 distinct brands. And over the years, she has developed a deep affection for the systematic approach to design, and her work is a testament to her passion for bringing diverse disciplines closer together. Laura believes that a good design system is created both by and for people, and has committed herself to ensure that the end user's needs and experiences are at the heart of every design decision. So please join me in welcoming Laura.
Thanks for having me. Man, that sounded so formal and also so professional.
Yeah. So let's dive right into your career. We already mentioned a little bit that you're currently at Muse and you were previously at HelloFresh. How did you first get into design systems? What led you down this career path?
I think it was actually a coincidence. So I had my very first job at IBM iX, where I worked with the carbon design system. So I already had some touch points like in my very early steps, but then I moved into like agency life, where I like also like always had like a sweet spot for like building like style guides and like sticking to rules. And then I applied for an illustrator role at HelloFresh and had my interviews. And I guess it looked like that all the people that interviewed me saw that I would fit better into the design system role, but I didn't really know that. So when I had my first meeting with my manager, he was like, "So, what do you think about design system? Could that be something for you? Because we think you would fit better in that role than into an illustrator role." And here I am, nearly 4 years later. Couldn't imagine to do anything else anymore. Yeah. Thanks to HelloFresh for that.
Yeah, that's awesome when people see that you have potential in a like profession that you didn't even realize existed or that you could do.
Yeah.
So now you're a design systems manager and team lead, which is different than being an individual contributor. What has that difference look like for you?
Yeah, I guess like when I was still like a senior designer at like HelloFresh, I was like, I feel for like more, and I actually like to like interact with people, like break kind of like silos and bring people together. So maybe actually going into like the lead direction would be the right path for me. But when I then started at Muse, like I would definitely say like the first 6 months been like pretty intense, because it's definitely like a huge difference in between just managing yourself and just like motivating yourself and like motivating other people doing the things you like, than being a manager and actually like having like direct reports that also sometimes having a hard time while you having a hard time and you can't show that. So the biggest difference is like really being this like cheerleader for everyone. That's like what I learned, like that I always kind of like need to stand at the sideline and be like, yes, you can do it, even if it's hard. So I guess that's the biggest difference, like always being like in a good mood. Like I don't have the feeling that I kind of like, as I was like a senior designer, can like show when I'm angry or like kind of like be frustrated in front of everyone. Like I always need to like put myself back and my like kind of like own emotions, and sometimes also like kind of like own beliefs for the sake of the team. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely like putting the team first and taking care of them as a
Yeah.
manager, which you have less people to take care of as an individual contributor.
Yeah, just yourself most of the time.
And how big is the team at Muse that you're managing? And then generally speaking, what does the design systems team at Muse look like?
So the team is like led by a trio. So me as the design manager, and then we have like an engineering manager and also a product manager, and the three of us as kind of like a cross-functional triangle. Then lead a team of like 2 senior designers and 4 front-end engineers and 1 mobile engineer. And we keep growing. We want to hire more next year, which is really nice, so we can support mobile a little bit more. And the design system, I would say, is still in a not mature state because Muse itself is in a hyperscale, so there is a lot of like constant change and like shift of roadmap and things the company needs to grow. So due to the case, the design system is like always in the eye of the storm. There's like always kind of like it's like a ship on like a wild sea, and I think we can already see the horizon and like that the rainbows and the sun is like somewhere far away, but it's still like a lot of work to do to make it like more mature because we are really ambitious and Muse as a company has high ambitions, and we like kind of like try to satisfy this need for everyone in the company with the design system.
Yeah, speaking of hyperscale, I know when we were talking earlier, when you joined, it was like a couple hundred folks, and now you are already like getting close to 1,000, which is wild.
Yeah, and we have Scooby in the back who was already there since 5 years, and it was like 70 people 5 years ago, and now we're like nearly 900.
Yeah, definitely hyperscale there.
Yeah.
So that means you've been in the unique situation where you're the hiring manager and you're hiring for design systems people. So what do you look for in a design system hire? And how does that differ from like a regular product designer or even if you participate in interviews for front-end engineers?
Resilience and empathy, I would say, because I think the majority of things you do in a day-to-day design system, like work, like creating a component, writing documentation, communicating with engineers, those are all things you can kind of like learn, because I know that from myself, right? When I started at HelloFresh, I had some like first kind of like touch points with design systems, but basically from the first day it was like, okay, now you lead the mobile design system. I was like, oh, I don't know nothing about coding. Like I did my last websites when I was 18, and now I like need to like maneuver in between like Swift and Kotlin, and I don't understand nothing. But like always like the empathy I brought in of being like, okay, so what do I need to do to satisfy my peers, my direct reports, my kind of like customers, and it was always like the will to like grow and like learn how other people kind of like speak, like learn their language. So for example, at HelloFresh, in the first year, I did like a path to iOS engineer, like beside my work. And like just by doing that, even if it then took me like way longer and like I did breaks in between, just by showing people that I really want to like collaborate with them and like learn how they work and what are their challenges, like that made me like, I would say like a good design system designer, and now also makes me a good manager, that like there was always like this curiosity and like no fear for new things, and like always like pushing kind of like my own boundaries to like learn more and like kind of like never stop exploring. And I think this is like the most like crucial skill in like a design system designer, that they're not afraid like to learn and like to kind of like learn new disciplines, like start coding, maybe learn like more visual principles, and like just like never stop learning, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Resilience and never stop learning are really great traits. I think especially for design systems, but also probably across the board.
Yeah, but I mean, like design systems are like constantly changing, right? I remember when I started, there was still like Sketch, and now there's no Sketch anymore, and there's Figma, and like I basically have the feeling, since I'm in design systems, I like switched my role and my skill set like several times. Right now, when you look on like AI and all the possibilities like AI gives to like, I guess, every role in general, no matter if you do like business or like coding or like design and design systems. And it's again learning something new, right? I didn't work before with like data science and like language models, and now I do. So I guess if you have like this mindset, then that's like always like a path to success.
Yeah, technology is constantly changing, and we're
Yeah.
definitely going to dive into the AI stuff later on. Um, but I wanted to backtrack a little bit. Can you tell us a little bit what the mobile design system team looked at HelloFresh?
Yeah, so it was me as like the main stakeholder for the whole design part. So I created the components, did the handover, kind of like did the planning together with the engineering manager of the team, and then it was like a team of like 12 engineers, like 6 for Android and 6 for iOS, and then like kind of like me together with like this like pack of engineers we developed in the mobile design system. Yeah.
Awesome. So you've definitely worked at some really large design systems team. Do you have any advice for people who might be hiring for their very first designated design system hire?
Good question. I guess if I would like think about like a podcast like Design System Office Hours, I love to listen to, like they would definitely say hire a design technologist, because then you have kind of like someone who can like satisfy the design part, but also have the ability to maybe like already like code some like basic components and like build some like prototypes to then hand them over to, I don't know, like an engineer that just like can spare 20% of their time. So I guess it's like good to have someone who basically can do it all, which is often really hard to find. Yeah.
For sure. And that's Davey and PJ's podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah, shout out to them. And for the folks who might be looking for a new job or a new gig, what advice would you give them? How can they stand out to a hiring manager?
Not focusing on the actual day-to-day work. So when I think about design system portfolios and like the process I just recently been through of like hiring someone, and then deciding for the person I hired now, the difference was that the person didn't just showed, I built this library and I wrote this documentation and this is our token system, that she like more showcased those were the challenges I faced, and like this is how I got through those challenges, because as I said before, you can learn how to build a component, you can learn how to write documentation. AI can write the documentation for you, but you can't like, I guess it's like just a core thing that you know how to handle challenges, or that you're willing to handle challenges, also put yourself behind, because as a design system or someone who works in design system, you're basically in the middle of everything, right? And you're not just like developing a feature for like a specific part of the product. You basically develop a product that everyone uses in the company. So yeah,
That makes a lot of sense. Somebody who can like overcome challenges, problem solve, and not put themselves necessarily first. It feels like somebody who has a little less ego. Because I feel like when I talk to a lot of folks in design systems, it is such like a service role, because you really are serving and taking care of the feature teams and like helping them. So you're already choosing a profession in which it's
I
not
think
necessarily about
caretaker
you.
fits really
Yeah.
good. Like I often have the feeling it's like being the caretaker in a kindergarten.
Fair, and you always have to repeat yourself multiple times
Yeah.
about everything that's launched, the new documentation.
Yeah.
Always got to tell them what's what. So speaking about documentation, and I know our earlier conversation, you are very passionate about tools, and so is Scooby. What does the design systems tech stack look like at Muse?
So we use Storybook to document our like front-end components, and then we use Supernova, obviously, where we bring everything together. So it's basically like our interconnection highway that brings together like our design tool, which is Figma, and Token Studio with like the front-end documentation. It's basically like the the mothership of everything. And yeah, obviously, like we have our design system in Figma. We all have our tokens in Token Studios, and yeah, and then Supernova connects GitHub with Token Studio and vice versa. Yeah.
Awesome. And I love the analogy that it's like the mothership, because
Yeah,
as
it
you can
is
tell, we
kinda.
like space. And your documentation site is also public, right?
Yes, it is public. I guess Muse always had been public. Like even like before we switched to Supernova, it was always a open documentation platform because I guess the end goal, as like for every great design system, is to be open source and everyone can use it. We still have like a long way to go, but at least we already public and like we really proud of the progress we already like made in the last year together with Supernova. Yeah.
Awesome. And we can definitely send out a link later too if folks want to take a look at what the Muse design system looks like. And how has that tech stack differed from what you decided to use at HelloFresh? What have been some of the big differences or similarities?
I mean, first of all, one was at HelloFresh, it was mobile, right? So it was Swift and Kotlin. Now it's React. We actually, like at HelloFresh, had like an app to like visualize the components. So you could kind of like download the app on your phone, no matter if you have Android or iOS, and then you could like play around with the components. But it was really hard to maintain. Like it was kind of like a little bit of pain in the ass. And then I must admit, like the documentation at HelloFresh was pretty scattered because we had Zero Heights, but we also had the app. We had kind of like something similar to like an app for like the web application, and then we had like an iOS documentation site. We had an Android documentation site, and then we had storybooks. So it was a little bit like all over the place, and like documentation in Figma. So I think they also want to switch to Supernova, so I guess they also want to improve. But it was pretty chaotic. Like I guess it's just really hard. Also, like the bigger the organization gets to like shift to something new. So that there was always the urge of like creating a single source of truth, but it's just super hard the more people you have in a company to like delete something and move and yeah.
Yeah, inertia is big. Once you're doing something, it's hard to make that change. But that does sound extremely chaotic to have both different platforms and OSs, but also for engineering and design and all of these different things to kind of try to keep track of.
Yeah.
But I would love to double click on how you all are using Supernova at Muse. So how you've talked a little bit about that, but how has Supernova been the most helpful for you and the design systems team, but also the wider organization at Muse?
I think it was like so from like thinking about it, we moved like from Zero Height to Supernova. It's like was like way more like for me as like a design system contributor, like easier to like set up documentation, like modify the layout more to the needs of Muse, which like before wasn't like kind of like possible. And it also like is like super easy to work together with engineers. So like we all have like one seat in Supernova and like we work simultaneous and like someone is adding the engineering documentation and we have a process on like which day of the week and when we like push the updates. So yeah, kind of like when someone is writing something, things didn't get published. I know there's like the option to hide the page, but you know sometimes how it is when you write documentation, you're always in a hurry and you forgot to put the slash in front. Yeah. So and also for the Token Studio connection, right? It's like super easy to like push and pull changes. For example, we first had like a B2B theme for light and dark, and now we just introduced like a new one for like our B2C side. And because we have it in Token Studio, we push it to GitHub and then it feeds into Supernova, and I basically don't need to do anything manually because everything is kind of like automated and it takes just like, yeah, so much, like gives me so much more time to work on other things. Yeah.
That's awesome. We love automated delivery.
Yeah.
It's on the banner. So now let's talk about AI. So there have been a lot of different talks, podcasts, keynotes, workshops, all of those things about design systems and AI. But I know you actually do use it very frequently for your design systems work. So can you walk us through how you are actually using AI for design systems?
Yeah, so it's first of all definitely my employee of the month every time since at least 3 months. He's like my favorite guy, the little ChatGPT. So like first we started to like use it for documentation. So we have kind of like based on an article I found on Medium, I created like a set of prompts that like kind of like go together with our tone of voice, how we like write handovers in Figma, and also what kind of like commands we use in GitHub, and like all those prompts we use to then create documentation and like writing everything on my own. I'm not a native speaker, so like grammar and all those things, not my best skill, I would say. So that really helps, right? Instead of like me sitting down for like 3 days writing 2 paragraphs, I can write like 4 pages of documentation for 3 components in like one day, and then I let it like proofread from someone. We adjust some things, and then it's done. So we just like save, I don't know, like 60% of time by leveraging it for documentation. But it also helps to like also create like engaging like assets for our documentation. So we have like an art direction kind of like visioning team in Muse, but they create like a base set of things, but then we can also take those things and like use like ChatGPT 4 and like DALL-E, and then create images, create GIFs that we can put into messages we send on Slack, because we all know like most of the companies are Slack first. That also means you have round about like 300 messages a day, and if there's not a nice GIF or great emojis, like no one reads the messages. So that also can help, or it helps to like kind of like proofread design system handovers, and like we can take the how we create the component in Figma, and we can take the code and we can like vice versa compare it. So there are just so many opportunities and like things like how you can like leverage AI, and I think it's like constantly growing. I think there's like so much, so many possibilities, and like using it in the future to like prompt like whole UI, like just like take all your components and then throw them into a language model and then train it, and then just say, please create me I don't know, like a B2B screen using a floating panel, which is like one of our components, and it's done in like, I don't know, like 5 seconds. So yeah.
Is that something that you're currently building, or is that something you're hoping AI can help you with in the future?
I think there are actually already some like plugins like outside that like testing it, and I mean Figma bought like this AI company that they like announced at the last Schema conference. Yeah, Schema. It was config. It was config. It's not Schema anymore. Schema was the
design system
conference. Yeah. And I mean, I guess they're already like experimenting with that. What we as a design system team at Muse want to work on is actually something we took in summer from a talk we saw from Spotify, and they're just like in a week, how they do all their things, created this like kind of like Spotify ChatGPT model where they feed it in all their components and all their guidelines, and basically they cut it down like support time by I guess like 54%, because people just go to the ChatGPT, I guess it goes like Figbot or something, and that they can just answer the questions there, right? That would be my absolute dream, if like people could just like go to Slack or to Supernova, we can integrate it there, and they can just like type the questions, and like you don't need to answer them anymore. So you just really need to take care of the super hard edge cases. That would be nice.
That's super cool.
Yeah.
Speaking of the future, what's coming up next for the Muse design system?
Metrics. So we growed a lot in the last year in terms of maturity, but now like we obviously want to like measure our impact and success. So we like working on like some automated scripts that like measure our foundational and component coverage, like how efficient people working with the components and where we can improve, like why and where people detach like components from code, but also in Figma, and what we need to do to improve that, so those things aren't happening anymore. And we will also invest a lot of time into onboarding because we still have like a lot of deficit there. Like we have a good documentation side, but we still see we kind of like need to grab the users in the first second and be like, hey, you start today at Muse. Here's our onboarding program. Go through the design system bootcamp, and then you're ready to go. So that will be, I guess, a big focus beside seeing how and where we can integrate AI in our day-to-day life.
Got it. I would love to double click on that onboarding program. What does that look like right now? How are you getting new, because you guys are in hyperscale, so you have new folks joining all the time. How are you getting folks who join to know about the design system and then also know how to use it the way that you all intend?
So currently we still do it in kind of like one-on-one sessions. So every time someone new starts in like the design department, I set up a call with me, and then I take like an hour kind of time and like walk them through where we came, like where we're coming from and where we are now, where we want to be in the future, how our libraries are set up, kind of like a short click into our like roadmap and what they can like what will come in like the next 3, 6 or 12 months, and then kind of like Q&A, and then it's still like really manual and like I really like kind of time intense, and we see, even though people love one-on-one sessions, like everyone likes to get the like full attention like in kind of like newer topics like design systems and how they work in every company. But like we would like to do it more efficient. Like I guess due to the case that like technology is constantly changing and like software is changing, like people just like constantly again and again need to be like re-onboarded on how things are working in a company. Yeah.
Gotcha. Cool. So before we move on to audience questions, so you guys all will have a chance to ask questions if you would like, I have one final one for you. What's a hot take or a controversial take that you have related to design systems?
If things should be rigid or flexible. That's, I guess, sometimes like some things I think about like every day, because on one side you hear everywhere that like a really good design system is like super flexible and like there are kind of like some fixed rules, but like everyone has their freedom and like composing UI and like pairing things together. But then you give people this freedom and then you see what they do and you're like, oh, all I want is like making everything really rigid. So there's no way you can change the color or the typography style on that card. So I guess there I'm like always like really like fighting with myself, because I know me as a design system user, I would, I guess, prefer to have just slots everywhere. But I'm also like really tied to this like systematic thinking. So I would like kind of like always stick to the rules. But if you're not fully fallen into the rabbit hole of doing everything like really systematic and you get like eye twitching if like the spacing is off, I guess you just like do things as you like them, which is like often against the system. Yeah.
That's fair. Where does Muse currently lie in the rigid versus flexible spectrum?
I just talked to an engineer today, and he said we are too flexible, and they would actually like to have it a little bit more rigid. Where I was a little bit like, huh, that wouldn't be what I thought coming from an engineer. So I guess like in an in-between state, like we try to give a lot of freedom of like working with slots, but then we kind of like try to back it up with like having all those like predefined like patterns and rules we document on Supernova or Muse.design. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Do you all have any questions for Laura? You can take like a minute to think about it.
I mean, we can also like stand up and
Yeah,
like talk casually.
We can also do that.
I have a question, because I love the philosophy of resiliency and never stop learning, continuous growth. And so what are some of your go-to resources or pro tips or be it online or people that you recommend? Like, hey, this is something that I use towards my self-growth professionally.
So when it comes to coding, I love Codecademy. I started using it in my studies to like learn HTML and CSS, and now I'm using it to like learn more about like language models and like how to leverage AI and like data science, Python, and all those things in my day-to-day life. And I really like their courses. They're made really well, and they give you nice certificates you can upload on LinkedIn afterwards. So that's definitely like a win. So that's for that. And like podcasts, like definitely like the design system office hours. I guess when I had like my first talk on a conference, I basically like listened to like 3 of the episodes of them like again and again till I like could take this and like put it into my talk like in my own words and like fitting together to my own specific case that I wanted to like talk about. And beside of that, there are like just like so many articles everywhere. So I guess my bookmark list on Medium is like 500 something articles. I try to read like 5 a week, and the
That's
list is
impressive.
growing. And I mean everything that basically comes from Figma, right? They're kind of like the gurus when it comes to like everything new happening in the scene. So yeah, and I mean you're also doing pretty good panels.
Thank you. I'm trying.
So I really enjoyed the one last week. That was really good.
Yes.
About adoption and also onboarding.
Yes.
So yeah, basically everything that LinkedIn gives me all the time. So they're doing like my feed is doing pretty well of like giving me FOMO all the time of things I still need to learn. Yeah.
Go for it.
Hi, I'm Simon. Do you think the industry of design systems is getting better at proving its worth to the business side of the company? So, for example, Muse is growing incredibly fast and it's a great success story. But in a company that's maybe not in that dynamic, do you think, you mentioned metrics a few times, so I was just wondering, do you think that that is something that the industry is better at explaining to the business side? And if not, do you think it's even a question I should be asking, etc., because of its actual importance, etc.?
I think the fight for buy-in will never stop because you can easily compare that to every other part of like product design, right? So I saw that HelloFresh and in the agency I was before and also now at Muse, like even if like there are a lot of things the business like needs and they're pretty obvious that kind of like the company would needs to do them, this team still fight about them, right? And it's still you need to push for getting things in the roadmap, like getting like budget for it. And I think it will never stop with design systems, right? And that's also always like there's also the question of does your company needs a design system, right? It's also still a validation. Like not every company needs a design system. Like sometimes you also find with just having like a UI kit and you don't need, if you're just like a landing page, you don't need a design system. You're fine with a UI kit and like some basic rules. But I guess if you plan to scale in the future, it's just if you do it from the beginning and you do it right, which I guess is the most hardest part of it, then I think you can already like save so much money from the beginning. But like often, like design systems are still kind of like out since like 5-6 years. I mean, I know that the first conversation like started around like 2016, but it's still kind of like in the baby shoes, right? If you think how long we have product design, visual design, graphic design, that's like out for like, I don't know, 100 years or something. People do like advertisement. So it's like really at the beginning. And I think like it's still like growing in maturity, like, yeah.
Thank you. And thank you for the question. Yes.
How does the coding knowledge help you leading a design system team? Like, would you recommend any designer to get to grasp basics of code? What are like the mental proceedings that help you knowing coding when designing design systems?
I think what is the biggest benefit of like you don't need to like be able to like build a design system on your own or build a website on their own. It's more like about that you can speak the language your engineers are speaking, they are just so more willing to do what you want if you speak their language. And if you know what they're doing and you can say, hey, but how about we change the prop here? And how about we maybe like take those 2 lines out and like change the function? Like that just makes them happy, right? You just need to kind of like go into their shoes or even your own shoes, right? If you like talk to an engineer and they like know how like color harmony works, that's great, right? So it's just the other way around. And also with like the progression in my career, I just also learned, I guess same also as designer, I don't want to say anything bad about engineers, I really love them a lot. Engineers can be lazy, right? And they want to do things quick. So sometimes they do things dirty, and you don't want that in a design system because it always kind of like kicks you in the ass afterwards. So it's like good to, like, when you review their PRs, you can say, hey, what you have done there is not how we intended it. And if I think about being an engineer that would need to use this component, this wouldn't be fun. So you can kind of like also poke them, right, and be like, hey, we can deliver more, we can do it better, like and I guess that's just like, yeah, just brings you forward. Like if you're not just sitting there and be like, I don't know what that function means, and I don't know the prop in the code like changes when you like flip it. So I guess it's just like beneficial. No one can talk bullshit to you. That's the most important, that when you like listen for 30 minutes and they're like talking and talking just about engineering stuff, and then you're like, oh, so can I also say something? I think the function you wrote there is not right. You need to do it like this and that. And then you have like this short minute of silence and they're like, oh, okay, good. Then we do it like that. And I guess it's just good for the relationship to engineers. Like they want to be challenged, same as you.
Yeah, speaking that same language, so one, you know what they're saying and you can talk to them, but I think the knowing what they're saying part is if they're not as interested in design systems or they're using something in a way that you don't want, you know that, and you're not just contributing or changing things the way you don't want them to.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Yeah, go for it.
I was just wondering, how do you validate that some components worth a place in your design system? For example, some product designer comes up with a custom solution. At what point do you decide that, yeah, that's worth pushing in your team?
I think there's like this golden rule of if it's used more than 3 times, it's technically valid to be in the design system. But also just like talking to teams, right? Like often someone comes up with a custom solution just because the teams work in silos, and maybe there's already like a system existing solution that would fit, but just because the teams are not interacting, and that's also where the design system is there for, right? We kind of like the connection point in between all the teams, and we dare to break the silos. So yeah, like golden rule of, is it there like used more than 3 times in 3 different flows in a product? Definitely valid to be in a system. If not, like always look if there's maybe something in the system that the product designer didn't know or just didn't know how the component in the system works. So it can maybe be like fitted to the needs of them. And if not, there's still sometimes, the snowflake sometimes is also okay. Like, yeah.
And you had a question back there.
Yeah, I want to continue in the theme. So do you do code reviews? Do you ask engineers for design reviews?
Yeah.
And what are some other ways how you get the quality line?
So when I start from let's say we start from the beginning to the end of the component journey, right? The design system designer creates the component, then we talk to teams and see if how we, for example, imagine the component suits their needs. Then we create a handover where we write down all the specs and props and how the responsiveness works, and then we come together with our engineers, and they kind of like review our handovers. We always try to like build in Figma what we have in code, so the closest, we use the same props, we use the same wording, so it's easy to find for both parties. And then afterwards, when the engineers start to build a component, like we always have like a 4 to 6 eye review. So a different engineer from the team tests it. We testing it as a designer and like some pre-releases. And then we also afterwards let other teams like that not in the design system like review our components, and then just we merge the PR to master.
I have a follow-up question.
Yeah, sure.
So that sounds great. So you mentioned previously in the talk that your design system is not mature enough. So in what it is? In just like where it is in the org? Because that sounds like best practice.
Yeah, but just because you try to work by best practices and like kind of like known rules, that doesn't mean your design system works, right? Because like as like was also like in my intro, like design systems like built by and for people, and like design systems are really highly dependent on the community that uses the system, and I think like having a functional design system community in a company that is in a hyperscale is really hard to maintain. So that's also why we want to invest more in onboarding and education, because there you can like give the people kind of like this feelings of like warmth and community, because you tell them, hey, it's your first day and we kind of like take you on the hand right from the beginning. And like some challenges we just facing at Muse is that like we have the hyperscale, but we also like as I said, like we're really ambitious and we want to push the product to the next level, which also means there's a current state and there's a future state that we envision. And like and bringing a product from like having like a big like UX and like tech debt to a clean like nicely working product with like a sleek UX is like just a lot of work, and the design system is in between, right? So as I said, it's like a ship on a wild sea, and I guess if we like once like let's say now we have like 10% of like our 100%, and I guess the closer we get to the 100%, also the maturity of the design system, will grow.
Thanks. Best of luck.
Thank you.
Any final questions before we wrap up this part? Cool. Well, thank you all so much for listening, and thank you, Laura, for joining us.
Always.
I think we all learned a lot, and I'll share out a lot of the links and things that you mentioned, like the podcast and the Muse design system and the follow-up email, so you all can click and explore and learn and all of those things. So really quickly, we do have lots of food. So there's a couple of things out right now, but we have like sandwiches and wraps and dessert. So please help us eat it all, because there's no way we could finish it. And there's also more drinks, so please help yourself to all of that. We also have some stickers with design system memes in the back with Ivana over there, and also Supernova stress balls, because our design systems are fine.
Yeah.
And then there's also a scavenger hunt. So there's a paper with a cup with 8 prompts. So there's some stuff like finding somebody who's wearing black and taking a picture, or answering some design systems trivia, like who wrote Atomic Design. And you can just write down your answer. There are also pens back there. And whoever finishes it first will get the Hues and Cues board game, which is back there by that monitor. And the way that works, if you all are designers, you might find this fun, is it's all those colors in a big board, and then you get cards with color chips on them, and you have to use 1 or 2 words to explain it, and then other people have to guess which square is actually that color. So you could also do hex codes, whatever you would like. But that's the prize. There's also Supernova socks for runner-ups if we get there. But as folks are bringing out food, I would love to take a picture, a group photo, up here with Laura, because it is our inaugural event, and you all are here for it. So we must document it for the future. Can you all please come up?